Where are Leave and Alessia? Here they are. Okay. Alice in Wonderland, Chapter 7. A mad tea party. There was a large table under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep. The other two were using it as a cushion and resting their elbows on it. It must be very uncomfortable for the dormouse, thought Alice, but being asleep, I suppose it doesn't care. The table was long and set for company, but the three were all crowded together at one corner. "There's no room," they cried out when they saw Alice coming. "There's plenty of room," said Alice, as she sat down in a large armchair at the end of the table. "Have some lemonade," the March Hare said. Alice looked all around the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. "I don't see any lemonade." "There isn't any." "Well, then it wasn't very nice of you to offer it," said Alice. "It wasn't very nice of you to sit down without being invited," said the March Hare. I didn't know it was your table," said Alice. "It has plenty of room." "Your hair needs cutting," said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great interest, and this was his first comment. "You should learn not to make personal remarks," Alice said. "It's very rude." The Hatter opened his eyes very wide, but all he said was, "Why is a crow like a writing desk?" "Good, now we'll have some fun," thought Alice. "I'm glad they've begun asking riddles," she said aloud. "I think I can guess that." "Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it?" "Exactly," said Alice. "Then you should say what you mean," the March Hare went on. "I do," Alice replied. "At least, I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know." "It's not the same thing," said the Hatter. "You might as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see." "Or you might as well say," added the March Hare, "that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like." "Or you might as well say," added the dormouse, who seemed to be talking in his sleep, "that I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe." "It is the same thing with you," said the Hatter, and everyone was silent for a minute. Alice thought over what she could remember about crows and writing desks, which wasn't very much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. "What day of the month is it?" he said to Alice. He had taken out his watch from his pocket and he was looking at it. Then he shook it and held it to his ear. Alice thought to herself a little and said, "The 4th. 2 days wrong," said the Hatter. Alice looked over his shoulder with interest. "What a funny watch. It tells the day of the month and it doesn't tell the time?" "Why should it?" muttered the Hatter. "Does your watch tell you what year it is?" "Of course not," Alice replied. "But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time." "Which is just the same case as mine," said the Hatter. I don't understand you," Alice said. "The dormouse is asleep again," said the Hatter, and poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The dormouse shook its head and said, without opening its eyes, Of course. That's just what I was going to say myself." "Have you guessed the riddle yet?" the Hatter said, turning to Alice. "No, I give up. What's the answer?" "I haven't the slightest idea," said the Hatter. Nor I, said the March Hare. Alice sighed. I think you should do something better with the time than waste it asking riddles that have no answers. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. Time is a hymn. I don't know what you mean, said Alice. Of course you don't, the Hatter said, tossing his head. I bet you never ever spoke to time. No, I haven't, Alice replied. But I know I have to beat time when I learn music. Ah, that's it, said the Hatter. Time won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you like with the clock, but alas. The Hatter shook his head mournfully. I had an argument with Time last March, just before he went crazy, you know, pointing with his teaspoon to the March Hare. It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. Do you know that song? I've heard something like it, said Alice. It goes on, you know, the Hatter continued in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep. Twinkle, 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 and went on for so long that they had to pinch it to make it stop. Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse, said the Hatter, when the Queen jumped up and yelled, He's killing time! Off with his head! How terrible, exclaimed Alice. And ever since that, the Hatter went on in a sad tone, he won't do a thing I asked. It's always 6 o'clock now. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? Yeah, that's it, the Hatter said with a sigh. It's always tea time. We've no time to wash the things in between. Then you keep moving around the table, I suppose, said Alice. Exactly, said the Hatter, as the things get used. But what happens when you come to the beginning again? Alice asked. Let's change the subject, the March Hare interrupted, yawning. I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tells us a story. I'm afraid I don't know one. Then the Dormouse shall tell us a story. Wake up, Dormouse! And they pinched it on both sides at once. The Dormouse opened his eyes. I wasn't asleep, he said in a hoarse voice. I heard every word you were saying. Tell us a story, said the March Hare. Yes, please do, pleaded Alice. And be quick about it, added the Hatter, or you'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters, the Dormouse began, and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well. What did they live on? Asked Alice. They lived on treacle. I think that's a cookie, said the Dormouse after thinking a minute or two. They couldn't have done that, you know, Alice gently remarked. Oh, treacle is just syrup. They would have gotten sick. So they were, said the Dormouse, very sick. But why did they live at the bottom of a well? Alice asked. Have some more tea. I haven't had any yet, Alice replied, so I can't have any more. You mean you can't have any less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. Alice didn't know what to say, so she poured some tea and took some bread and butter and then turned to the Dormouse and asked again, well, why did they live at the bottom of a well? I want a clean cup, interrupted the Hatter. Everyone move over one place. He moved on as he spoke, and the Dormouse followed him. The March Hare moved into the Dormouse's place, and Alice took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got a clean cup. Alice was worse off than before, and the March Hare had just spilled his milk onto his plate. The Dormouse had closed its eyes by this time and was going off to sleep. The Hatter pinched it, and it woke up with a little shriek and went on, "They were in the well learning to draw. They drew things that begin with the letter M, such as mousetraps and moon and memory and muchness. You know, you say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see a drawing of a muchness?" "I'm so confused," said Alice. "I don't think—" "Then you shouldn't talk," said the Hatter. And Alice had certainly had enough. She got up and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep, and neither of the others cared or noticed that Alice was gone. She looked back once or twice, hoping they would call her back. The last time she looked, she saw them trying to put the Dormouse in the teapot. "I'll never go there again," said Alice as she made her way through the woods. Then she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. "That's very curious," she thought. "I might as well go in it." And in she went. Once more she found herself back in the long hallway and close to the little glass table. "This time I'll get this right," she said, and took the little gold key off the table and unlocked the door that led into the garden. Then she nibbled on the right-hand bit of mushroom until she was about a foot high. She walked through the little door and at last found herself in the beautiful garden. Bye! That's the end of that chapter.